People will do stuff because they want to, not because we tell them to. True resilience is the notion or the idea or concept of never falling in the first place. Because the single biggest inhibitor, here you go, I'll chuck this one out, challenge everybody who ever listens to this. The single biggest inhibitor of human performance for me, or two, will be self-belief and imagination. Because trying stuff and failing fast means we come to the solution quicker than anybody else. If you know me, and you're getting to know me, people that know me close, I have actually always said that I will leave this planet with no regrets. And that's why I'm struggling, because I genuinely don't ever do regret. And I'll explain why. Is because I've made mistakes, but I don't regret any of them. Because the mistakes would have been made through honesty, because I didn't have the knowledge, because I made a bad decision. And the only regret I would ever have is if I didn't learn from it and did the bugger again.
He ran into buildings for 30 years. He coached athletes to Olympic and Paralympic gold, and now he uses everything he's learned in both worlds to build better business leaders. This is Graham Ravenscroft, and this is a different kind of leadership conversation for you. Hello, Graham. How are you today?
Mark, it's great to be here. Thanks for the invite, and I'm really looking forward to our chat.
Yes, I'm really looking forward to it. So let's go straight into it. So what does a firefighter and an Olympic coach have in common when it comes to business leadership?
Wow, there's the opener. Okay. I guess I didn't always know, and it's something that I've learned to understand what we do offer. So here's my thoughts of what I have learned and why that is the case. When you're going to incident command in the emergency services, what you realize is you can't rely on hopeful reaction to get a really quality outcome, because people's lives are at line, their buildings are on line, their livelihood or the environment. So we need to be prepared. So the team that turns up need to have the skills, the knowledge, the confidence, and of course, the strategy to actually effectively bring whatever it is that you're facing to a really highly successful conclusion. And then, of course, if you're going to work with Olympic athletes and prepare them, they don't stumble across greatness too. Medals at that level are not won with any chance taken. Okay, they are very carefully planned for. They are strategically, I think, actioned. And of course, what I did learn is it involves an incredibly experienced team of experts working very closely together. And that's where the leadership comes in. The human body is a fascinating tool, okay? And what I have learned is I start to think about how the human body is made up and how, as an athletics coach, we develop them to really high levels of performance. That's when I realized that our bodies are very much like our businesses. They're made up of component parts that we have to develop, not one at a time, that we have to develop in unison. And more importantly, nobody's going to win a medal on the highest stage because one part of their kinetic chain. So that's the neuromuscular skeletal system that we all have. Nobody is going to win at the highest level because one part of that framework is well developed. They win because the entire system within our kinetic chain is finely tuned to work together. And that's exactly the same as successful businesses.
So the word I took from that, when you talk about firefighting as well as preparing for sports and Olympics, is preparedness.
Yeah.
So it sounds like that's something that has been very important when you're going into a fire situation and you're going into an Olympic Games. What components for you do you feel are important when you're thinking about preparedness that you learn over those 30, 40 years?
Yeah, great. So I have, which I know I've not shared with you at all. So I have four, what I call fundamentally essential common characteristics. All right. These are the characteristics that I believe are absolutely ever present. Now, I'm not trying to replace any definitive list, because we could write a pretty big list of some of the factors that make up greatness. But I don't believe, and I'm happy to be challenged, that can you achieve greatness in whatever you're doing, whether that be dealing with an incident, whether that be, delivering business goals or delivering an Olympian, without talent? No. So the first one is talent. What I mean by talent is the developed skill. And skillfulness isn't a theory. Okay, skillfulness is the learnt practical application of that theory to get a result. That's what I call expertise. When I'm talking about experts, I'm talking about people who have developed incredible amount of theory, but more importantly, have learned to practically apply it in the real world to get an outcome. All right, a purposeful outcome. So the first one is skill. So that's the knowledge, expertise. The second one that I talk about is strategy. Because I don't know of one person or organization or team of people I've worked with, and I've been blessed to work with probably the thousands now. I'm not counting, but there's certainly hundreds, if not thousands, who haven't delivered greatness by chance. Nobody stumbled across it. So we have to have a strategic approach to delivering the success. So we can't just rock up on the fire ground or the incident ground and have this thing happening in front of us and hope that any reaction will deliver an outcome. We have to turn up very well prepared with a strategy in mind of how we implement and we use our resources to get an outcome. Exactly the same when we're producing an Olympic athlete. Okay, we have to prepare them for that moment strategically. The next one, of course, is never underestimate the impact of motivation. And I guess this came to the forefront of my mind some years ago when I was having a conversation with one of the very senior people at British Athletics, a hugely respected coach who sadly now passed. And I was kind of having this conversation about, okay, I believe my planning is pretty good. It didn't work once, and it wasn't a coincidence of twice. When you're in the 10s, 12s of success, you probably got a pretty good approach to delivering success. So I kind of had this, and I'm looking at good talent. And what I mean by talent in the athletics world, of course, is, if I'm honest, mum and dad have done well. Okay, so they have a particular genetic makeup, so they are naturally born towards being successful in a particular way, moving fast or jumping high. So why then, when I got this mix of talent and strategy, weren't people being successful? And he said, you need to cut yourself some slack, because what's really happening is people are not going to deliver themselves to success because you want them to. They're going to deliver themselves to success because they want to. So it's not enough to me to have the energy and excitement, which I have and I need, to be in these moments. I need everybody around me, and particularly the performer, to be motivated to be successful. People will do stuff because they want to, not because we tell them to. I mean, they might do stuff we tell them to in the short term, and certainly in moments of risk critical times or economically critical times, and certainly in adversity, but over any sustained period of time, like dealing with a protracted incident and preparing for it, like preparing an Olympian or developing an organization. No, they do it because they want to. So the third one's motivation. And the last one, of course, is apparently Rome wasn't built in a day, and I'm guessing that's true. And Olympic champions aren't built in a day, and business success is not turned over in a day either. So my fourth one is resilience. But my resilience or my thoughts of resilience may be slightly different to others. I don't know. So we can kind of challenge that. Do you want me to go into that thought now?
Yeah.
I think when we first talk about resilience, what I tend to hear back is examples of resilient behavior. And of course, Ian Dowie famously quoted, this bounce back ability idea. And the reason I use that is because I think it sums it up beautifully. If you want to talk about resilience, it's bounce back ability, your ability to get back up, your ability to go again, face adversity, deal with the knocks. And of course, that's true. But I don't describe true resilience as that. That's resilient. That's examples of resilient behavior. True resilience is the notion or the idea or concept of never falling in the first place. So actually, when I'm preparing a team to deal with a critical incident, when I was preparing an Olympian to deal with that stage, or I'm working with business owners to achieve their success, what I'm actually looking for is every single area in their people and their planning and their processes and their resources, and work out where will something go wrong? Where will something break? And then I help them basically take a strategic approach to putting things in place to ensure they don't break. That is resilience. So talent, strategy, motivation, and resilience are my 4 absolute fundamentals that are.
Imagine this: you have a great business, strong results, and a message worth sharing, but most people outside your network still have no idea who you are. Growth slows when visibility stops. Podcast guesting solves that. Instead of chasing leads or interrupting people with ads, you speak directly to audiences who are already interested in your topic. They share your story, your approach, and your value you deliver. Trust is built before the first conversation. At Podcast Introduction, we help business owners get booked on the right shows. We research targeted podcasts, pitch you on your behalf, and position you as the expert, so every interview becomes a growth asset that drives leads and authority. If you want more visibility, more credibility, and more conversations with the right clients, podcast guesting is a powerful lever for you. Visit podcastintroduction.com and start expanding your reach today. And is that your fireproof framework?
No. So the fireproof framework, okay, allow me. So the fireproof framework basically is a strategic readiness framework. So people talk about the reaction, okay? So the reaction of a business in a moment when the client demands something. It's the reaction of the moment when you're at a critical incident, or the reaction of your behavior at an Olympic stadium. Whatever your situation, you will have to perform in a moment. The fireproof framework is from me reflecting on 40 years of coaching and working with executive business leaders to actually look at the stages that I took to get people ready for that moment. Okay. And so the fireproof framework is an acronym for the 9 stages of preparedness. And that's what, that's the book I'm writing at the moment, 20,000 words in. And
it's impressive. Well done.
Yeah. So I'm happy to share whatever you want. Yeah. The framework.
So let's go into this talent, strategy, motivation, resilience. Yeah. So you talk about the talent. So when you immediately mention talent, it makes me think of people that are talented. But actually, when you're talking about an Olympic athlete, talent only gets you so far, doesn't it? And,
yes, absolutely.
And being able to turn up every day and train is going to get you much further than pure talent. I'm in the rugby world a little bit. I sort of coach a young team, and you can see the talented kids, but if they don't have the right attitude, they're never going to succeed. Correct. So having the right people in place to bring that talent forward and build that up, I think, is incredibly important. So for you, when you're talking about talent, do you think of Does talent mean the skill sets that they have as an athlete? We'll talk about athletes for now. Or is that the experts, the coaches on one side that are bringing the talent out of the individual?
Really easy answer. It's both. Because I think we need the collective. Again, I can't think of a situation where we've got a single person delivering greatness that doesn't have great people around them. So I always think of greatness in terms of team anyway. And even in the world of athletics, we think about the current greatness, the greatest of all, and Mondo Duplantis, of course, the Swedish pole vaulter. What we do is we see Mondo, and we see him delivering, and this beyond any expectation. He just broke his 15th consecutive world record.
Wow!
But of course, we see Mondo, but of course, behind Mondo, there's incredible talent and expertise. We will have the top of the world physical conditioning coaches. We will have soft tissue therapists that put him back together and prepare him for put him back together after every session and prepare him for the next one. We will have dietitians, globally recognized dietitians, that make sure that can happen because, of course, how he eats. We will have sleep experts. We will have financial experts for the funding. We will have resources of performance centers. There is a tremendous amount of stuff that goes behind it. So the answer to the question is, look at the talent that you need in your teams. Okay, so what is the talent? So, for example, let's bring this back into the business world. If we're going to work in a production situation, then of course we're going to maybe need design experts, so creative thinkers. So where are my creative thinkers? We're going to need people that can turn that creativity into production. So we're going to need people that can produce stuff. We're going to need great leaders, all right, to organize your people and resources into a really highly efficient and effective, systematic way to deliver an outcome. So we do need to recognize talent in the people. Firstly, we need to know what talent we need. So, for example, if I'm going to look at a high jumper, of course, I want somebody that's, a successful big one will always be better than a successful little one, although there's been some pretty good little ones. But what we do need is we need people that are naturally springy. And I say that because springiness, ping as we call it in this world, is natural. It's not developed and trained. Okay, we can maximize it through lots and lots of work, but it's in people. So we're looking for people that are naturally pingy. Naturally pingy people won't always win a medal. So we need to look at the talent. So as a leader in that world at the High Performance Centre in Loughborough, what I was looking at is the talented people to have in the team to make sure that this natural talent of people that look like they can get off the ground quickly have the talented people around and the expertise to make sure we maximize that potential. And that came in all of those experts.
So we're going to move on to the next one because I'm fascinated with these 4 different areas. So strategy.
Yeah.
So let's think about your 30 years on the front line.
What
for you, like you said, no chances, you make no chances when you're making those decisions, and you're going into life and death situations, either your own or other people that you're saving. So what for you, when it comes to strategy and taking no chances, did you learn through firefighting for 30 years that now helps business owners?
100%. The very first thing, and this is the first point of the fireproof framework, and that's the F, of course. And that is that it's critical before we react that we truly frame the situation. What I mean by that is what's occurring now. What are we looking at? Do we look backwards? Yes, we do, because there will be circumstances and root causes of what we're seeing now, whether that be in your business at the moment. Whatever's happening in your business at the moment will be the consequence of some cause. And that might have been a purposeful cause. That might have been by accident. It might have been forced upon you. So we look at the events that are happening now, and we frame that to gain information. If I'm going to provide a reaction, okay, I need to fully understand the circumstances that I'm looking at this moment and the factors that are affecting it. I then also need to consider the potential hazards that I'm facing in that moment. Okay, so in a fire situation, it might well be flames and smoke, but it might be explosive material. It might be trip hazards. It might be collapse. There'll be many, many factors, okay, that could present you with hazards. Let's have a look and transfer that into the business world. That could be an economic hazard. If I do nothing at the moment, then there's a significant cost implication here. If I do something, there could be a significant economic cost. But actually, what if I do nothing with this situation? What's the impact on my people? So without going through them all, I would say frame your situation and then look, identify the hazards. Okay, so hazards are things that can cause you harm. That is physical harm, physiological harm, economic harm, okay, self-esteem harm, mental harm, emotional harm. For example, there's loads. So that's the next stage. So you've got your situation, okay, whether that be on a fire ground or in your business. You're going to frame the current situation. What am I looking at? What's happening now? The very first thing I'm going to look at is what has got the potential to cause us harm. Okay, you probably see I'm going through the fireproof framework.
Yeah, no, this is great. This is great. And
this is the strategy, yeah.
And then let's talk about motivation.
Yeah.
So what separates, you've been through 3 Olympics, Commonwealth Games, every age group in Great Britain. What separates an athlete that makes it and an athlete that doesn't make it? And I'm assuming that motivation, in your definition of motivation, is going to be a massive part of that.
It's a will. Listen, motivation for me is the fire that burns inside us. Some others, people can call that your will. It's your will to achieve. There's an inner will and a desire, and that is what I call motivation. Now, people have different motivations, and I think success for me, or the extent of the success, let's say, will fundamentally be defined by the extent of that will. So, for example, some people might have a will to have an international vest. Nothing wrong with that. Fantastic. I got one as a youngster. You know, I jumped for England and Britain. So I've got international vest. Now, fantastic. But then, of course, they get distracted, or it's enough. And then, of course, you get people like Armando Duplantis. When you achieved the world record, what's next? Where's the motivation to go on and 6 years later have broke it 15 times? That's a different human being altogether. Because this isn't about you. This is about everybody around you. Because the single biggest inhibitor, here you go, I'll chuck this one out, challenge everybody who ever listens to this. The single biggest inhibitor of human performance for me, or two, will be self-belief and imagination. And when we hit a ceiling of a world record, so we've gone beyond anybody that's ever been before, or our business has turned over more than we've ever done before. We just landed the biggest client that we've ever done before. Now what happens? Where's the motivation now? Somebody has to reset. But it's not about one person resetting like a coach. Every single person that works in that team has to come on board and be inspired at the same level of motivation. Otherwise, we've got to leave.
So do you think there's something in business owners that, and this leads into the resilience point as well, do you think there's something in business owners that are never satisfied? And did you see that in some Olympic athletes as well?
So let me tell you about the Olympic athlete thing. This probably answers the question perfectly, I believe. It's just come to me. So I have a level 5 elite coach diploma with the IAAF. Okay, so to get that, I had to do a significant written project of national or international interest. So I'm not going to go into that, but I'll summarize it. It was about the transitional fallout or success rate, or the factors that affected whether people that were world-class at a young age, why they didn't, or very small percentage, actually transition to be highly successful at senior level. Okay, so that was the bit. And much like yourself today, I finished off those interviews and I interviewed, I think, 10 like genuinely world-class performers and 10 of their world-class coaches. And one of the questions at the end I asked in the quick fire was, do you think you achieved your potential? And how many do you think said yes?
Probably not very many.
Not one of them.
Really, not one of them.
Share with you, one of them was Jessica Ennis, who did pretty well, and with most of you reasons. One of them was a guy called Steve Smith, of course, who still holds the world junior record that was set in Barcelona in the 90s. Both of those didn't feel they achieved their potential. I think that answers your question in terms of the sports people. And I think it's that level of drive and that level of self-exploration. But it's not just about us as human beings. I think they're exploring the event. And I think they're exploring, the wider world of what's possible within the event. And they're comparing and they're challenging themselves in that moment. And I think that's what businesses do, the best businesses. It is about exploring outside of the moment. And that's down to I think great business leaders are always driven by the idea of potential. And potential is excites me. I mean, you can probably see it in my face. It excites me because the word potential for me suggests no boundaries.
Yeah.
Potential isn't gained in increments of what you're doing, because that's just progress. So potential is something beyond what you do. So actually, what I think top business owners need to possess, and it's okay to be ticking over and doing well, and that's the motivation. What do I want to be? But if I want to be the very best in the world, or my business to be successful, then we have to be prepared to think past the end position. And are those people ever happy? How can they be? Because we never get there, do we?
No, that's true. Look, guys, if you're enjoying this episode, then do consider just taking 30 seconds of your time right now and hit a 5-star on Spotify or Apple. It only takes a few seconds and it genuinely helps the show reach a wider audience. So, Graham, when a leader comes to you and they want to work with you, what do you commonly find is something that they're struggling with that you can help them with?
Well, crikey. So there's a number of areas, and I guess I could just share with you the key areas. I think if we look at business performance as a whole thing, and you subdivided that whole thing, there would be all sorts of things. There'd be people in it, there'd be resources in it, there would be client expectation, policies, processes, there would be lots and lots of things. I guess if I had to say, where do most people come to start with me, there's probably 3 areas. One will be truly to help them explore the concept of high performance in their world. So how do we define high performance? And I have obviously a different view. It's based on my experience. So I'm not going to apologize for saying that I pitched the concept of being able to call yourself a high performer pretty high, because I believe we're not high performing unless we are at the top of our game industry wide. Now, people say, what if I'm in a business that did 5 times what it did last year? I would say, very well done. And you're doing really well. That, for me, doesn't define high performance, because it has to be comparable against what's possible. So, for example, if we turn up to an Olympic Games every 4 years, and by the way, each event only delivers 3 medals every 4 years, and you win one of those, I think beyond any conceivable doubt, we could agree to define that as high performance. So actually, if we're going to look at our businesses and say we're high performing, I think we should at least be comparing our business delivery and performance to that of industry leaders. So that's kind of one of the things that we do. So we help people. I say we, it's not just me. There's me and my business partner, of course, Teresa Wright. There's only the two of us. So our job, firstly, one of the things we get them to do is work with strategic leadership teams or any other invested parties or significant influencers within the business or outside of it to explore what high performance looks like. We then help them create a strategy to achieve it, and then we put things in place so that when we leave, they can sustain it without us. So that's the first thing. The second thing that people tend to come for us is they recognize the role of managers and leaders in that journey. I can't think personally of any team, organization, crikey, business that doesn't have managers or leaders. And there's a very good reason for that, because their functional roles, their necessities in delivering business success. And I think what people are starting to realize, and I think they've always realized this, but I think society and demand and change globally shifts the priority in terms of our approach. So like economics will shift the priority. Just get stuff done. You know what I mean? I said supply chain will shift the priority in terms of what we think. One of the constants for me, and people will always come back, is recognizing the potential role and impact that really good managers and leaders can have on your business. And I think it's only at times when we really start to dig in, or possibly following an event, that we get a reaction that says, actually, you know, our managers aren't prepared for this, or we don't have leaders capable of leading in certain moments. So, of course, we don't just react. Again, what's the fireproof framework about? It's about preparedness. It's about being ready. So let's not wait till we identify a cause of poor leadership, or we don't understand what high performance looks like, to get somebody in. But that's really when we tend to invest, because we have to. But that itself is a reaction. Let's see the value of investing in understanding what our future high performance looks like, breaking it down into really solid component metric parts, and then creating systems and people that have the skill and the strategy and the will and the resilience to deliver it in the first place. So high performance, leadership, and the second one, by the way, is teams. We help people structure teams to make sure that they're working in the most efficient way. Because I think all people have teams. You know what I mean? And of course, I think let's default to the most honest of sentiment or intent. You know, is anybody going to work thinking, I want to be, am I allowed to swear? You know, that I want to be shit today, or I'm going to mess up, do something that, no, I don't believe. Let's say that I'm not sure that, you know, there's no intent. But when we look at teams and we look at purposefulness, what we start to unpick is the leakage. The leakage in time, the leakage of efficiency, the leakage that occurs through the lack of skill or knowledge. So that's the other thing. So there you go. High performance, managers and leaders, and of course, the effectiveness of teams.
And something you mentioned there, which I think is really interesting, is metrics and measuring things.
Oh.
For you, as a person helping business owners, what is the most, are metrics the best and only way to measure your business, or is feel and intuition about where the next step is, where the growth is, where a company can grow. What's the balance, and what's your view when it comes down to metrics or intuition and feel?
I'll say, great question again, Mark, if I'm honest. A really great question. I'll explain why I think it's a great question. And I'm going to give you two responses because I think there are two. Okay. If we know what we're working towards, okay, so we have a plan, we have a strategic kind of performance goal, and is the field that we're working in, and we can measure the required improvement of where we are now in the same lane to deliver that, then of course we could probably work out those metrics ourselves. So what I mean by this, if I'm working with somebody, too many people will think a performance goal, sorry to do that, that's awful, isn't it? Too many people think a performance goal is defined by a statement of intent. That was my statement of intent. Okay, so fill the gap. I want to be a world champion. Oh my gosh, how useful is that in terms of organizing people and resources and action planning and generating alignment and measuring effectiveness? I would say not at all. All it is some, as I say, statement of intent or something to give us a little bit of excitement by. Okay, so the very first thing I'm going to do with somebody that wants to be a world champion is I'm going to start to subdivide what a world champion looks like. What I mean by that, and there are the metrics out there in each event, that's been well documented over the years, apart from the odd outlier. So a Mondo Duplantis, a Usain Bolt, these are what we call outliers. Their bodies are built different. They do different things. So we don't have the consistency of metric to measure against. But just standardly, if I want somebody who wants to be an Olympic champion, I actually know how strong they need to be within this kind of some parameters, because not everybody's exactly the same. But there's a thing called a funnel effect. So as we get to the end and we look at Olympic medalists, we can start to collect common data. Common data will define that an Olympic medalist will be this strong, this fast, technically this good. They'll eat this. Does that make sense? As we get further away from that moment, that will be much broader. So we've got to be careful when we're selecting what we think is talent against these measurements, because these are work towards. But what we should do, okay, the answer to the question here is look at the end result, subdivide these metrics, and use that as really important data. It's the data will help us work towards, and it will help us employ the right tactics and the right methodology to, deliver us to those outcomes. Now, businesses can do exactly the same. If I want a business that is successful and turns over £1 million, producing something, I'm going to go, let's subdivide the £1 million. The £1 million means this many sales, means that I are in this many people over this many hours and this much equipment and this much of all the other costs. And when we subdivide it, and hopefully it will leave us an operating profit. Is that fair?
So you're looking at the end result and working backwards. So it's kind of like I've had people on this show who have been engineers by trade, and they look at that same approach, right? What's the goal, and what are the steps that I need to do to achieve that goal?
You have to
but one thing, Graham, entrepreneurs,
go.
They do a lot of this stuff, especially early stage, by feel. What's the next step? I think the next step is that. I think the next step is that. And sometimes people, as I say, engineers that have been very successful growing businesses, they had an end goal. But entrepreneurs have a slightly different mindset. It's like a growth mindset, which is where the intuition, feel versus metrics comes from. And I think both are valid in business. You need to have a gut feel of where you want to go towards, as well as how to achieve it. But so entrepreneurs are slightly differently drilled rather than a CEO, for an example?
Okay. Yes. So high achievers, and if we call successful entrepreneurs, not all entrepreneurs are successful, of course, people by definition. So I'm going to concentrate not on the word entrepreneur, but high performers, because that's where I was going to go. Now, if we think about high performers, I would define those, as I say, top of their game. I've already done that. Now, let's use a phrase here. If you're going to work past your end position or anybody else's end position, let's define that as a place where you or nobody else has ever been. Okay. Where are the metrics?
Yeah.
So we don't have the metrics. So that was my next part. So I'm never going to default to say, if we can find and identify somebody that very little's not been done before, for goodness sake, until the late, great Felix Baumgartner stepped off a platform from 129,000 feet at the edge of the Earth's atmosphere. Okay, nobody had done that before. But most people, there would have been a version of it. And most of us are working in our lane, not the entrepreneur. I'll come back to it. So there will be able to define and probably get an idea of certain metrics that will deliver this outcome. Okay, so let's go to this point. What about when we don't have the metrics? Okay, then we take what I call a risk-preferred approach. I think successful entrepreneurs are still risk-preferred. What I mean by that is they will still do what I said. They're going to consider change. They're going to identify the hazards. And they're going to risk assess the hazards. That's the R of fireproof, by the way. The reason you need to do that is so that we don't make those decisions. Bear in mind, we're going to have to make decisions with information we've never had before. We're going to have to ask questions that we've never asked before. We're ultimately going to make a decision with information that we're seeing for the first time. You're not always going to get that right. And so, yes, there's an intuitive part of that, but I have an interest in, I think, I've been challenged a few times. I have an interest in thought on what intuition is. I think some people want us to believe, there you go, mate. Some people want us to believe that it's some kind of sixth sense. See, I disagree.
I think. What's your view on it?
I challenged a very, very well-respected lecturer. I'm not going to say who, somebody from Scotland, an expert in this field. I was sat in the audience and he said, he was defining intuition. And he said, it's a bit like the firefighter that kind of goes into a job and he doesn't know why, but he just feels that, something's not right. And he comes out and says, everybody needs to get back. And then something happens. And I was like, oh, okay. We've got to challenge that. That's not a sixth sense. I tell you what it is, and the reason we think it's a sixth sense. It's a skill.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like this intuition, it's not it's not a sixth sense. It's
not something you can't explain.
But it's something that's trained in someone.
Correct.
It's a muscle. It's like a muscle that you develop. Creativity is the same as well. That's a muscle, a brain muscle that you work on, and you can become more creative. So I totally disagree that
the idea of intuition. Let me just explain. So we shouldn't ignore intuition, and this is the point. We shouldn't ignore it because I think it's a skill. I think the reason we can't explain it sometimes is because of the speed it happens and the lack of understanding that we have before we make a decision. But it will be based on some knowledge. But it's a subconscious event.
Yes.
So when I was in the fire, when I came back out, I thought, we got to go. What do you mean? I think, and I've done this, by the way. I was literally thinking about an incident in Corby in a factory, and I went, right, everybody out. When I look back on that, I thought actually there was an increase in heat. There was different noise. I could feel wind. The darkness was darker. And actually, when I go back and add that up, that's got a flashover all over it. But because I didn't have to engage my conscious mind, we call it some like intuitive sense, or I don't know if that's a phrase, intuitive sense. No, it's a skill. So the entrepreneur won't necessarily be able to quantify in a moment, or even want to spend the time to quantify, or do they need to? What they do need to do is they take a different approach. All right, it's called iteration. And I think it's about, do I wait to collect the data? Take the tech companies in the world.
Yeah.
So the fastest growing businesses on the planet for the last 2 decades, one of them tech, yeah? What data? What are they collecting? They didn't have any data. So they're creating the data. But they're not just flying on a whim.
Yeah.
What they're doing is they're being creative. They're coming up with an idea which will be based on some knowledge and an incredible amount of skill with creativity, and they try stuff fast. And they fail really fast.
Yeah.
Because trying stuff and failing fast means we come to the solution quicker than anybody else. And I think what entrepreneurs, in my humble opinion, do, those that are successful, they use their skill, and people that work beyond the end position are brave enough to use what they know and use that level of it to put 2 and 2 together and hope they come up with 5. But they have a go and they take a risk-preferred approach.
Yeah.
They're not going to break themselves doing it, or their bank or anything, or those that are not successful will. So I think if you think about what the hazards are, what the severity could be, or the impact, yes, then have a go. But learn from the moment, make the adjustments, go again quicker than anybody else.
But the other thing is they are measuring, but they're measuring their results rather than starting from the end game and moving backwards, aren't
they? Don't have it. They don't have it. What I am saying that I really want to finish, if we can find the results or a degree of measurability, then the reason we should subdivide the notion of the end into these metrics is because of my favorite word that I've not shared yet. I can't believe we've got 46 minutes and I've not shared it. And that's purposefulness. I want everybody to go away and assess I've given you a free one. Go and check the purposefulness of your practices and your people and your behaviors. Because purposefulness, behavior, and actions are what I assess. Purposefulness can only be defined if what you're doing has real meaning and relevance to what you're trying to achieve. It will only be defined truly by the value or impact it has on the end goal. How on earth can anybody measure the purposefulness of their people or processes in the absence of any metrics? I don't know.
No. How do you think you've evolved as a leader, Graham?
Sorry, my friend. Sorry.
How do you think you've evolved as a leader?
Ooh, that's a bloody good question. So this is situational and circumstantial. I think early on, like most people as a leader, I was thrown into it. If I was to tell you, it was actually my first kind of known leadership role, truthfully, was in the fire service. And somebody recognized me as, I hadn't even showed any will. And I always laugh that I didn't. No will to do it. I was happy being who I was. And I was called to the office. And as I walked through the door, I literally saw a flash in the corner. I caught some keys. And I think that was kind of the initial interview, that I'd caught these keys. I'm sure it wasn't. But when I go back then, I mean, like most people in their first step up, I absolutely stumbled across it. And I made so many mistakes, you know. I thought I had to deal with somebody this way. And I thought people needed telling. Okay. What I've learned along the way is what I've told you there. If I'm going to be an effective leader, there are 2 words that I think I learned and I share with others. I think the best leaders, and this is well chewed over debate, isn't it? So I'm going to cut it down to 2. Keep it simple. It's my job to positively influence those around me. That's what I do as a leader. And that's with motivation, that's with their ability to learn and strategize and all that stuff and come together. And that, so influence. All right. I want to influence people in the best possible way. I want to role model the right attitude and behaviors and approach to being successful. That's the first one. The second one as a leader that I evolved is I recognize that it's my job to enable them. That means I need to develop them as individuals. I need to put the team together. I need to make sure they have the resources, and I need to create the right environment that enables them to be it.
Amazing.
That's how
Look, guys, if you've made it this far through the episode and you're enjoying it, please do consider joining my community on Patreon, where you get behind the scenes and exclusive content. Go to patreon.com/businessgrowthtalks. What's your risk appetite, and has it changed over the years?
So I think, okay, great question again. So what I've learned here, and think about my roles, crikey, high performance sport, emergency service, those early days, I think when things can go, okay, so in order to be successful, we're always pushing the end line. In order to rescue somebody in a critical moment, then there's a risk element. There's always a risk element. Winning and developing the human form to win at major championships associated with risk everywhere. Every time you tell somebody to get on the track and put their foot forward with force, there's risk of harm. Every time you decide you're going to do 2 more weight lifts, so it's just part and parcel of it. So I think you have to have an appetite for risk. However, what I have learned, as I said, and I used the term earlier, I think what's changed is the way I apply the risk. Now, that is to consider what risk preferred looks like to you. So for us in the fire service, we had a kind of a phrase that we used, and that was, are you risking your life for savable life? Now, we can't always be clear and be able to define that at any stage the life was savable if we couldn't see it. However, what we could do is factor in the environment. Again, the looking back, we frame the situation. What's the situation now? What state's the building in? How full of smoke is it? How do we get to this point? Do we know where the known casualty is? These factors will help us to decide whether this is savable life. Now, if we've got savable life, then we need to take some degree of risk. Same with an athlete. If an athlete, the whole point of developing athletes is the principle of overload. That's how you can define it. Which means if somebody can run that fast, they have to run faster. So how does that happen? Well, they have to be stronger. How do you get stronger? Well, you apply more load on resistance. All of that is surrounded by hazard and risk. But it's the severity that I focus on. If I do this, what's the impact? How severe would the impact be? Now, am I prepared? Is my risk appetite changed? I think as a young firefighter in the back who just wanted to get in and probably wasn't aware of the reality of all the dangers because it's hearsay, you actually haven't witnessed it, was different after 30 years when you see the reality of what's possible and what can go wrong. Exactly the same as you develop athletes. You know, how do you know you've pushed an athlete too far? Normally when they break. And you go, why did I do that? Okay, and you use that information. The appetite in business, for me, is no different. We have an appetite to take chances because that's how you get past the point you're in.
Yeah.
And there's a human performance curve. Just let me say in terms of business, there's a human performance curve. I urge everybody to search it out. And there's a tipping point of performance. And it's the point where we go from comfort zone to strain. To stretch, sorry, my apologies. We go from comfort zone to stretch. And that's why my old late mum, bless her, she was right. She used to say, son, you need to step out your comfort zone. So she's absolutely right. By definition, if we're going to step out of a comfort zone, then we're going to be risk taking a chance.
Yeah.
Because we're entering a place where we've never been. Yeah. I think it's the job of business managers and leaders to explore the stretch zone. And here's the challenge, and contentious maybe. The tipping point of the human performance curve is where stretch goes into strain. Why would you knowingly take somebody into strain? I think for all the right reasons. I think people are scared to do that. I don't believe success at the highest level can happen unless we explore strain. But we need to explore it with a very close observed eye, because it's the point of strain where we know our safe working points. And we can be sure, but we have to do it in a way that has some degree of preferred risk to it, so that we don't go bang and snap something completely.
Yeah.
We can step in and intervene. But I hope that answered the question.
That's brilliant, Graham. Look, we're coming to the end of the interview. I asked the same 6 questions to all of my guests. They're quick fire questions. They don't need a quick fire answer. First question is, what's the best decision that you've made?
Oh, God. So the best decision I ever made, what, to date?
Yeah.
Okay. I believe the best decision I've ever made, I've yet to see the outcome, but it was to get on and bloody write a book that I've spent 5 years telling a lot of trusted people around me who believe in me to say, oh my God, you should write a book. And I'm like, mate, I can't even write good Christmas cards. I'm a speaker, not a writer. And I started writing the book, and I'm so excited to get it out there. I know I need a lot of help with it. I've got some incredible help in Teresa and people around me. That's the best. I think that will prove the best decision.
Brilliant. What's the best piece of advice you've been given?
Oh, brilliant, man. It was from a friend of mine, a mentor of mine called Mike Holmes. And I've actually referenced him in my book. He doesn't know yet. He's not likely to see this, but I better ring him and tell him. And the reason being, he was my personal coaching mentor in athletics. And he said to me, boy, he called me boy then. I was like 24, but he was a bit older. I'm not gonna say. And he literally called me boy or chum. And he said, boy, this game's really quite simple. I said, really? He said, yeah, when somebody stands in front of you, all you have to do is work out how to find the centimeters. He was talking about vertical height.
Right.
That advice was incredible, because that was the one that led me to subdivide successful people, and it started to unearth all the areas. And we're not just talking about speed and strength, because if you look at champions, yeah. So the best advice, learn to find the center. Where will your centimeters come from? And if you're a business owner watching this, where are your next centimeters?
And the next question is, who's the person that's helped you most in your career? So you've already mentioned one. Could we mention somebody else that's helped you massively in your career?
Yeah, so that's really, wow. Okay. So there's a number of people to shout out to, I think. I think athletics wise, there was a couple of really influential people, top coaches. I think people like Mike Holmes, Dennis Doyle, and I'm going to upset somebody if they watch this and not. There are a lot of people that guided me along the way. Athletics wise, every athlete that ever gave me the permission and the privilege and pleasure to work with them helped me, because in the absence of that learning, we don't have, the wisdom. Wisdom isn't time served. Wisdom is the learning that we get from the experience. So without all the experiences of every athlete, I wouldn't have all the wisdom. So every one of those, I'm going to grab this moment. I think from a business point of view, there's been a number of people, really on a guy called Steve Ashby. There's a lady called Jane Thomas. But I think, in more recent years, I have learned more about myself and what I believe I know, and more importantly, of how to reapply that to get real success with business owners, because of my now business partner, Teresa Wright. She is the most incredible support. She has pushed me out of my comfort zone. She's pushed me well into stretch, and we've stepped into strain. and she knows exactly what to do, and she knows exactly how to pull me back from it as well to keep me safe.
Amazing.
So yeah, Teresa, right, in terms of who I am from a business point of view now.
Brilliant. Next question is a bit harder. Tell me about a regret that you have.
Oh yeah, okay. A regret that I have. Crikey. Yeah, be careful with this one. We're talking about business, right? And
whatever you want, Graham. Whatever you can want. You've had three different careers, maybe more, but 3 different careers. Tell me about a regret that you've had up to date.
A regret that I've had. So the reason I find this, the others are easy, right? They're quick, they're quite easy. And I'll tell you what, let me share why I'm saying this, right? The problem I have, and this is going to sound like, oh no, it's not enough. If you know me, and you're getting to know me, people that know me close, I have actually always said that I will leave this planet with no regrets. And that's why I'm struggling, because I genuinely don't ever do regret. And I'll explain why. Is because I've made mistakes, but I don't regret any of them. Because the mistakes would have been made through honesty, because I didn't have the knowledge, because I made a bad decision. It was my choice to make and I got it wrong. I can't regret them. The only regret I would ever have is if I didn't learn from it and did the bugger again.
Right.
But that's not who I am. So no, I don't regret, I learn. And that's the truth.
Okay.
Sorry if that's...
No. Usually I push people on this.
Yeah,
but you've given a really good explanation of why you don't feel the regret that other people have. I often push people and say, and we don't have to go to, but push people and say, like, there must be a decision, a relationship, a way that you did something that you 5, 10, 20, 30 years ago, you kind of go, I probably shouldn't have, in your example, pushed that person so hard.
Okay. So I know where you're going, but again, let me just say that is exactly the point. They're what I call learning moments. And we've talked a lot about, I don't know, we're trying to convince ourselves of our worth at any given time. I certainly don't try to do that. People would decide on any worth and to be in my company or ask for my opinion, or certainly my services. So I kind of course I've spoke to people wrong. Of course there was somebody that why didn't I go and spend some more time with them before they passed? But those decisions were made with so many factors. I just can't bring myself to regret it, because it would have been honest at the time. And if I did do something wrong, and I've definitely spoke to people wrong, I've definitely probably made a bad decision. How can I regret those incredible moments of learning that have delivered me to now? I just don't call it regret. So yeah, sorry.
Was there a time that you wanted to give up, and what made you pull through?
Yes, of course. So 3 careers. 3 careers and the current situation. So the first time I wanted to give up was at training school in the fire service, and it was the very first day of BA, breathing apparatus wearing. And we were cast into a room that was just inconceivably hot. When I say that, I think you've got to try and understand what 500, 600, 700 degrees is about. Aluminium, if it sustains 700 degrees for a long period of time, will start to decompose and break down. We are in kit that, it was designed to kind of keep you safe for moments, but certainly not sustain you in it. It's hard to even explain. To stand by an oven, open the door and get that, whoa. So multiply that by 5 maybe, and then you can't go whoa. It's so scary. I rang my mum, who's no longer with us, that night and said, I can't do this. I'm scared. This is beyond anything I dreamt.
And what made you pull through? Was it the conversation with mum?
Yeah, go again. You know, these people are here. Have they killed anybody yet? I thought, no, not that I've heard of. Has anybody been seriously injured? No, I don't think they have. Okay, probably go again and trust them. And of course, it never felt as bad the second time. And then, of course, they teach you skills and where to position yourself and how to apply water. And of course, yeah, so it was that first day. That's the first one, fire service. Shall I give up? There was no other time in the fire service, even through trauma and the rest of it. That was the very only thing. I loved every moment of my 30 years till the day I left. Athletics, many. And I think, I'll tell you for why, because it was only over the latter end of that 36 years. So I did that the year before I joined the fires, all the way through the career. And I've got this day job, and I've got a wife of 32 years, and I've got children and grandchildren. And I think the dedication that you have to give, if I was talking twice a week for 15 years driving to Loughborough, spending all day there, and you can already work out I'm already doing a 48-hour shift and the whole time fire service. I've not mentioned being a father. And then I've got to go away. I traveled every single year for probably 12 years with a team to a major championships, and you're away for 10 days and you're leaving all this behind. Yeah, so several times a year, I would be driving there, probably mustering up my preparedness, and my will was challenged all the time because I felt that I should be somewhere else. So that was difficult. Right. And then I guess in this business, no, although I had a moment today with the book. I had a real moment today with the book. I questioned. I want it to be so successful, not for me. People are going, what a nonsense. No. Well, if you know me, it's not. I just feel that I want to share 40 years of magic, but that will only happen if I get it so right. And I massively question my ability to do that today. But Teresa was in the house.
That's great. Tell me something that most people don't know about you.
Most people don't know about me. Yeah. Yeah, I'm kind of an open book, so I want to give them something they don't know about me. What did I do? Something I did, something I didn't do.
Music, books, films, theatre. Don't know. Like, is there anything? Is there anything you do you? I tell you, one of the best answers I've had for this.
I want to give something really good here.
It was a really straight business person, like. Been a leader for 20 years or whatever in a company, and he said, I travel around. He was American. I travel around the country going to musicals. I love musical theatre. And it was just like, wow, okay, like a really straight, serious CEO sort of person. And he's like, I just love musical theatre. So just think of something along those sort of lines. That is there nothing? Is it business, relationships?
Relationship, something that people don't know about me. Not many people would know about me. What would not many people not know about me? I'm so open. I share it a lot, you see.
Well, what would I not know about you from this vantage point?
Okay, so let me just say here, I am very much an open book, and part and parcel of my style is storytelling. So I share myself, and sometimes, with humor, I will share some crazy stuff. But I guess one thing a story that I tell that only the people that have been in certain workshop would know is that I once actually had to dress up in scrubs and go into a hospital operating theatre to remove a ring from a man's penis. That is the truth.
Well, I think I've now got a new best answer.
Yeah, thank you for guiding me to something.
There are a lot of follow-up questions, but unfortunately we don't have time for it today.
I'm glad we don't have time for the follow-up questions.
And my last question is, what does legacy mean to you?
Yeah. For me personally, I think I think the book and the framework feels like the legacy in terms of business, because it's about what you leave behind. It's about when you're no longer in the shirt, whatever that looks like, is the lasting impression that you made on what you did in your time in the fire service. It's what you did for people in the time that you were a performance coach at athletics. And however long I stay in business, is the contribution that I make and how people view that and the impact that my effort and time spent. Is the footprint or the impression that you leave behind.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Graham. Thank you so much for your time today, for the conversation. It's been absolutely fantastic. Look, that's it for all of us today. If you've got something from this conversation, the best thing you can do is hit subscribe wherever you watch or listen to it. It genuinely helps people find the show. If you're on YouTube, do hit the like button and drop a comment below. I look at all of the comments and tell me what your biggest takeaway was from today. And if you're on Spotify or Apple, do hit a 5-star review. It really does work well in the algorithm to make a real difference to the show. And if you know someone that you think really needs to hear this conversation, share it with them today. I would really appreciate that, and I'm sure they will as well. Thank you so much for your time listening, and I'll see you in the next one.